All right, so cognitive deficits associated with traumatic brain injuries of any kind, mild traumatic brain injury you experience, attention, emotional distress, fatigue, and depression, moderate headache and memory problems, and then severe. You guys probably, I won't say you probably won't be doing too much testing with just screening with someone who's had a severe traumatic brain injury. You might. More likely than not, you'd be doing a full battery with someone who's had a severe traumatic brain injury. But if you are doing just a screening, then someone with a severe traumatic brain injury, you know they're not going to go back to work. You know that they have many, many functioning deficits, and a screener, the only reason I can see you might do a screener is follow-up to a previous neuropsych exam that was done, just to see if they're maintaining or if they are deteriorating and functioning. Other deficits associated with many TBIs. Anosmia, what is that?
It was on the boards.
Yes, if you're studying for the EPPP, you will need to know what anosmia is. Yes, and that's because of the contra-coup injury. We've got these bony protrusions right here that shear off the olfactory bulb. The good news is that right back here, it sticks out like that. The good news is that the olfactory is one of the 2 areas of the brain that regenerates, and so after a head injury, that should come back within 6 months to a year. If after a year's time they still are having problems with smelling, then that might be lifelong. I think I mentioned in here, I had an inmate who came in and said that he had lost his sense of taste and smell, and I put some salt in his hand and asked him to taste it, and he's like, yeah, that tastes like salt. And I let him know that he had anosmia. He didn't have the loss of taste, but they are linked, so his ability to discern with tasting was gone. But if he put the jalapenos on and the salsa, he could still taste really spicy, he could still taste bitter, he could still taste salty. What about tinnitus? Tinnitus is the ringing in the ears. Whereas hyperacusis is too much noise, really being affected by too much noise. I know a lot of us are like that already, naturally. Attention deficits, emotional functioning deficits, of course, depression, anxiety, personality change, and post-concussional syndrome. So post-concussional syndrome is something that is in the DSM still. You can look up the specifics about it, but it's really a residual deficit in brain functioning. And what you see with post-concussional syndrome, kind of in addition to everything else, is the personality piece. Any deficits in personality or psychogenic disorders that may have been pre-morbid will come out tenfold. Meaning that if someone has a propensity toward antisocial behavior, after a head injury, they're going to be a lot more antisocial. If someone is a little bit, histrionic, they blow everything out of proportion from time to time, after a head injury, they're going to look like they have the full histrionic personality disorder. Now, it's not okay to diagnose them now with a personality disorder unless you're very, very clear that it's due to head injury. More likely than not, you will want to have personality change due to head injury as the diagnosis. And then just really explain what that is. I had a gentleman, gracious, he was in his 70s, and I did testing with him and actually ended up diagnosing frontal temporal dementia. He had had a car accident, and after his car accident, he was absolutely convinced that people loved him. Everybody loved him, especially women. Especially the nurses in prison. And he was being written up every other day. I mean, he was incredibly inappropriate. But he was brilliant and smart, and everyone loved him. And to the point of delusional, but not. And because of his grandiosity, because of his self-centeredness, I indicated that he had personality change due to head injury, specifically narcissistic type. I thought that he might have had the pre-morbid narcissistic personality disorder, but I had no way of diagnosing that going back. But for going forward, he definitely met the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. But remember, personality disorders are lifelong. So on axis 2, I put narcissistic traits. On axis 1, I put personality disorder due to, or personality change due. Top-down control. Okay, we've all heard that something like 90% of our brain is there to, inhibit the other 10%. The concept of top-down control illustrates this. So we've got the top-down modulation and the bottom-up processing. I said it before, I'll say it again, though I forgot my brain model. Our brains develop kind of like a flower opening up, okay? So the middle of the brain, brain stem, responsible for breathing, heart regulation, all the stuff we need just to stay alive, has to be in place before anything else develops, okay? Now we're born with all these billions of cells, but they're not necessarily connected yet until we have new experiences, and those new experiences then start connecting all of our brain cells. So with the top-down control, the forebrain is responsible for inhibition, planning, organizing, impulse control, all of the things that are necessary. Did I have the wrong side? For inhibiting our primal instincts. And our primal instincts are to get our needs met regardless of what's going on. So the theory of top-down control is really any type of head injury, the last to develop is the first to go. And the last to develop is our forebrains. Our forebrains aren't fully myelinated until our mid-20s. So those of you in your early 20s, you have some craziness still to get out of you for a few years. And after a head injury, that will be the first that's disrupted. Top-down control suppresses our primal instincts. It's found in the frontal lobes. And any kind of impairment will lead to lowered frustration tolerance, impulsivity, depression. This leads to what? Stress, which leads to problems with sleeping. So that's why it's also really important to get a good history and find out exactly what's going on with the person, because if you find out that they did have a head injury a few years ago, it might be that this top-down control is impaired, and that's leading to all of their current symptoms. So an example, if you don't know Gazzaniga's work yet, anyone not know Gazzaniga? Gazzaniga is the guru of all things neurochemistry. You really need to read his work. He's a great guy. You can actually see him on YouTube. I saw some of his videos on YouTube. Great speaker, by the way. Species-specific behaviors. Gazzaniga, one of the explanations of top-down control that he talked about was rats. Any rat who has ever had any type of neurological impairment does not cover their poop. They no longer cover up their feces. Animals in the wild all cover up their feces. Why? Because it's a natural instinct to keep predators from following them. But anytime an animal, and rat specifically, has had an injury to his brain, he no longer covers up his poo, because that's a higher order thing to do. This was generalized to serial killers, because it's been hypothesized that all serial killers, or many serial killers, have had a head injury earlier. And so the disconnect between higher consciousness and that connection with the rest of humanity and consequences has now been disconnected. So that was one of the hypotheses that came out of that. Now let's move a little bit into testing interpretation for people with traumatic brain injuries. The theory is that all of us, by the time we reach 40, will have had at least 3 mild concussions. So if you have mild concussion when you're 14 playing sports, you saw stars, you got back on the field, everything was fine. Then, you're 27 and you're at your bachelorette party, and you fall down, And, yeah, okay, then you have another mild concussion, you were fine for the wedding, everything went off well. And then now you're 37 and you're in a motor vehicle accident. It's not your fault, it's the other guy. Then you won't have cumulative effects from those three because enough time elapsed and you were healed in between each ones, and you didn't have any diffuse external injuries in that time. So, all right, so that was a good question. You will often see for people who have had a mild traumatic brain injury, and you're doing tests later on, so a few years later, that their PRI on the WAIS is less than their BCI, the Perceptual Reasoning Index. That's due to a number of different reasons. The block design subtest of the WAIS has two ways of interpreting it. One is interpreted with time bonus, and one is interpreted without the time bonus. If you have someone with a head injury, one of the ways to look at block design in a more meaningful way is to look at it with and without the time bonus to see if processing speed is one of the things that's being impaired with that test. Processing speed is one of the main things that goes with any head injury. I have a very fast processing speed. That's why I wear a helmet anywhere I go. That's why I don't drive a motorcycle, but maybe will someday when I'm 50 and it doesn't matter. Processing speed is also seen on the trail making test, and we're actually going to showcase that here today. And what did I write here? It's a good indicator of brain injury and sensitive to damage from alcohol use and stroke. So processing speed is a huge thing that you'll see decline in with any kind of testing that you do for someone with traumatic brain injury. The Neurobehavioral Functioning Inventory was designed by Pearson specifically for people with traumatic brain injuries. It's a 30-minute questionnaire for ages 17 to 80. It's published in 1999. And it's a brief self-report inventory that looks at many different areas of functioning. So that might be something that you look into if you're interested in doing testing with people with brain injuries. It measures somatic complaints, depression, memory, attention, communication, aggression, and motor problems. There's also two forms for it. It's a patient form and a family record form. And the family record form is really good for collateral information because you can't often rely on the person in front of you because they might not be a good historian because they might have brain damage.